In this video, I want to speak about ambiguity because ambiguity is a part of life, and for certain, it's a part of astrology. And there are several factors, several pieces involved that make ambiguity a part of the work. And I feel it's very important to be able to embrace it, to have a positive relationship to ambiguity. I think first and foremost, we tend to be afraid of ambiguity. There's this security in saying, okay, I know exactly what it is. I know what you and me are. I know what we're up to. I know exactly what to expect. I know where my future is going. And I know for certain that this is the exact moment of your birth. This is your natal chart. There's no space for ambiguity. And the truth is, we don't really know what's going to happen. We don't know what you and I are. Things are very fluid. We have the present moment. That's like the definite, non-ambiguous thing. And it's a head trip because you can't grab it, you can't possess it. And when it comes to the natal chart, there are so many cases and examples where you really can't know the exact moment of the natal chart, the exact moment of birth. The most obvious example of this is someone that doesn't have a birth time. And you can do rectification work, which is a way of tracking events in your life to kind of work backwards and determine when you were born through that. It's a little tedious. A lot of people do it, and you have to be really good at it to do it accurately. And there are some people that don't even know what time of day. So there are many examples where I'm working with someone, I don't know their birth time. And they ask me, can I still get a reading? And the answer is absolutely yes. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. Other examples of ambiguity is you might have a birth certificate and it says 8 a.m. or 8:30 a.m. And when I see that, I'm like, probably an estimate, usually, right? I mean, there's basically a 1 in 30 chance that you're going to be born, on the hour or on the half hour. And most of the time, hospitals will round up or down. Even 15 or 45 is often a rounding. So it's good to take that into account and have that in awareness. And the most accurate birth times is when one of the parents recorded it in the moment, or the midwife, and the mother remembers it. That's always the most accurate, when the mother remembers it. But even then, there's this fun question of when is the exact moment of the natal chart? Is it when you crown, and even the crowning kind of go in and out for a while? When you pass the birth canal, when the body's fully out and you're separated now, when you take your first breath? But if you're a water birth, breath might be a while. It's a really interesting study. And you can probably be objective and scientific about it by doing rectification work and sort of nailing the exact time of birth and then correlating back to your record of when all these different phases happened during the birth. But most people haven't collected that data. Most people haven't cataloged, this is when crowning started, this is when the baby fully separated, this is when the first breath happened. Most people aren't differentiating all these different pieces, but theoretically you can make it a little bit of a scientific exploration. So there's a lot of ambiguity. When you write the birth time down, that might be the exact time, but who knows? Maybe you wrote down the time where the baby first crowned, but the actual natal chart is the first breath, and it might be 5 minutes in between the two. Who knows? Well, most people in hospitals will write down the general procedure in hospitals, at least, is to write down when you're fully out. So it's all really interesting. I've always kind of suspected that my personal birth time is a minute or two earlier. And I've never done in-depth rectification work to determine that. I think that would be a fun thing to do at some point. But I would have to really want to do that. So, we have the more smaller examples of, it could be off by a few minutes. It might have been estimated off by 15 minutes. We have the examples where it's I don't know, it's off by an hour. I was born in the morning. I don't quite know. And we have the larger, more ambiguous examples of I was born on this day, or I was adopted and I have no clue what time I was born. Very common. So it's okay. Do what you can to refine it and to kind of pinpoint as close as possible. But being able to work with ambiguity is so amazing. It's a maturity, and it's a way of opening the doors to a different quality of insight and accessing a greater presence and attunement to the soul itself. When we don't depend on data alone, like specific information. I guess your Pluto is right there in the first house, a few degrees from the ascendant, and that's like a definite, and we can tangibly work with that. It's concrete. So we can possess it in a way, right? We can say, this is real. I can have this as knowledge. But when we don't have that, when we can't fall on that, when we can't depend on something that we can be so certain of, it invites a greater presence, a greater curiosity, because the natal chart reflects the soul's reality. And interestingly, some of the most powerful readings that I've done, the most powerful sessions, have been with people who don't know their birth time. Because I find it actually takes my mind away from a rigid, defined, this is what we're doing. And it opens the field to the true magic of the present moment and what wants to happen. And honestly, that's what I do in every session. That's kind of what's happening more and more for me, where I'm really using that as a sample for how I want all of my sessions to be, how I want my life to be. To not approach it with a rigid, defined criteria for how I'm doing it. To stay open to what wants to happen. And so since the natal chart reflects the soul's reality, I can really just listen and tune in. And we have the archetypes. We'll have all of the main aspects. The moon might be ambiguous. The moon may not be in one, or it could be in one or two signs in some cases, because the moon, moves through a sign in every 2.5 days. So there are situations where the moon might be in one or the next sign. And the aspects of the moon will definitely be ambiguous if you don't know the time of the day at all. So, relating to someone and not knowing their moon sign, but having a sense of it, it's important not to be guessing at it. Be like, oh yeah, that sounds like a Pisces moon. Like, oh wait a minute, that sounds like an Aries moon. To kind of stay away from like quick linear associations. Because if you're talking to your friend, if you're just sharing your wisdom and your insight and your presence and your loving awareness with someone, you don't need to know their chart. But if you add their chart to that, if you add even a little bit of their chart, if you add their south node, the sign of the ruler of their south node, aspects, there's just that alone, there's like so much context. It's like, walking into a home and you've already eaten dinner, you're content, and you're not expecting anything. And then like someone says, there's dessert. Like, really? Great. That's what it's like. So to see the natal chart and the specificity of time and exactness as a bonus, to shift the playing field from, okay, I can't be perfect, and I just need to feel into it. We also have examples where we have the birth time, but we have a planet on the cusp of a house. It's actually very hard in my experience to discern what house it's in. When it comes to sign cusps, that's different. I experience sign cusps as very specific and very exact. Like 29 degrees of a sign is 29 degrees of that sign, and it's in that sign. It's not like a blend of the two. But when it comes to houses, it's sort of, ambiguous. One, there are different house systems. So like one house system might put a planet in the second house and the other one has it in the third house. And two, if it's so close to a house, especially if it's one of the four angles, like the ascendant, descendant, IC, and midheaven, that angle has like a vortex energy that's like pulling in that planet from the prior house. So we just have to feel it in, is that planet conjunct other planets in the next house? And just look at the themes, look at the energetics of it. There's so much to consider. So if we approach the chart from more of a poetic, open space, when we come to those ambiguous places, one thing that I see happen a lot is because there's almost like a fear of ambiguity, and like not knowing how to deal with ambiguity will imply a certain inadequacy in one's skillfulness or professionalism. I see a lot of people coming up with hard and defined rules and criteria for how to deal with certain things. Like what it means to have a planet on a house cusp. It's just in my experience, there needs to be a lot of fluid space, simply because in many cases, the birth time can be off by like 30 seconds, and that can literally change the game if you have a planet right there on the cusp of a house. So there needs to be spaciousness to explore it. And a lot of people talk about how planets on a house cusp have this transitional quality, and I find that to be true, but accurately interpreting that, right? Interpreting what that means, like what that actually reflects within the soul's journey. So we have to stay open to feel the soul itself. When we come back into direct experience, interestingly enough, by embracing the ambiguity and letting life reveal it to us, we cultivate more wisdom and more insight. We actually develop knowledge and understanding because we're not trying to know, what does this mean? How do I work with this? How do I interpret this? Rather, we're letting go of this possessive stance to know and own, and we're allowing connection and discovery to be at the forefront of our experience. It's humbling, and I feel that the benefit that we offer is immense in that space, because for myself, if I have a lot of insight and knowledge and skill in astrology, but there are a few areas that are ambiguous or I can't pinpoint the birth time, if I let go of saying my value is rooted in my ability to read a chart that is 100% accurately a reflection of the moment of your birth, if I let go of that and I say rather, my value and my skillfulness is in my presence and my love and my attention, and through the vehicle of that, the wisdom and the knowledge and the insight that I have can pour through as it arises. If that's my starting point, then I come into the session with abundance, because obviously I have a lot to offer. Obviously I have a lot of things I can talk about, a lot of knowledge and insight and skill and technique, regardless of not knowing the birth time. So if I just let that be there, and I give my attention to presence and trust and sincere interest, all of the other things can be used as the moment presents itself. And that will reveal back to me so much more about this soul and this natal chart than I could have ever figured out if I was trying to think about it ahead of time. Lastly, when I work with a natal chart, I really start the session with prayer. And the prayer for me is a way of, one, affirming that their journey and my journey are one and the same. And that my healing and their healing are the same. There's only healing. There's one journey here. And that allows me to stay really centered in my own experience and to appreciate that everyone that I work with, everyone in my life, really, it's a reflection of the one unfolding. And I'm a part of that too. We're all a part of that. It's just what is. And so the more I allow for unity in oneness in my work, the more healing and authentic and sincere and powerful it is for everyone. And two, the prayer is also just a letting go, an affirming of trust, an attunement to the healing that wants to happen, to letting go of my own agenda, my own need to create an identity defined and fixed on a way of being or a thing that I have to prove or show. And through that vehicle, love is put at the center, and love heals.